right, everybody, welcome to BO Boys for Monday, May 6th. Fuck it, it's a raw feed. We're doing it live. I'm Clayton.
Yeah, I'm Pat. Clayton, this is a sad one. This is a
Mm-hmm.
tough one. This is an
Yeah.
emotional BO Boys that we're all going to have to get through together. Supposed to be the kickoff to the summer, which is honestly supposed to be one of the happiest times of the year at
Yeah.
BO HQ. And I walked around BO HQ today and there was a lot of frowns. There was a lot of drawn faces. There was a lot of people just at BOHQ just leaning up against a wall, just shaking their head, not
Mm-hmm.
making eye contact, uh, tissues being passed around and not in the good way that you like to
Yeah.
see at BOHQ, but in the sad way.
No,
Um,
after Barbenheimer, the tissues were definitely being passed around in a different manner.
yes, but that is not the case for Ryan Gosling's latest opening weekend, The Fall Guy. So we're going to get into it and I don't know. Are we going to calm the masses or are we going to be part of the masses? We'll see. But why don't you begin, Clayton, by giving us a plow for the summer kickoff weekend of May 3rd, 2024?
Number one, The Fall Guy made $28.5 million in its first frame. Number two, Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace made $8 million, only 2,700 theaters. It's at $482.6 million in its 13 and a third thousand weekend in release. 12, what is it?
20, 25
1,303.
years. It's
Yeah,
25th year
it's
of release.
25th year of release. Number three, Challengers, $7.6 million, down 49%. 29.4 Cume as of its second weekend of release. Number four, Newbie, Taro, yeah, $6.5 million in its first frame. And number five, the collab, Godzilla X Kong, made 4.5, down only 38%. It hemorrhaged 428 theaters. It's at $188 million in its sixth weekend. And Pat, if you could tell I was a little bit flummoxed,
Mm-hmm.
I'm flummoxed by this
Yeah.
top five for
Mm-hmm.
sure.
Yeah. There's a few things that threw us through a loop here. And let's just start with it. Let's rip the band-aid off and let's take out the box of tissues. Fall Guy opens 28.5.
Mm-hmm.
I was saying 40. You were saying low 30s. I mean, you pretty much read the room on this one.
But I mean,
In that
even that wasn't high, wasn't low enough. Like I thought I was going super low on this. I
right.
thought it'd be one of those things where, I was hoping this was the reality I wanted to live in where, this thing maybe doesn't get to what you're saying, but at least makes like 35, 36. But 28 and staying that way all weekend. I mean, I think the feeling looking at that 28 on Friday,
Mm-hmm.
we knew that it wasn't going higher. Like we knew that this wasn't a situation where people were slow to go for whatever reason and it would tick up because 28 just felt so final
I
when we
mean, when
saw
we
it.
saw the on Friday morning, when we saw those Thursday night preview numbers that were
Mhm.
around $3 million for the Thursday, that was just such a gut punch to
Yeah.
see that those Thursday numbers were in line with a Bullet Train, or lower than
Mhm.
Bullet Train, lower than Lost
Yeah.
City. And not to say that because those movies were hits at their budget, but Fall Guy just came in with such big expectations, kicking off the summer, and I think Universal maybe doomed this movie by giving it that slot, by putting the pressure on this movie based on a TV show from the early 80s, and that's not why this underperformed. But
No, no. Yeah.
overplaying the expectations by putting it into this slot. That's
Yeah.
just the reality, whether they truly matter or not. People put different expectations on different things based on just history, and people think, especially in the last 20 years, if a movie's opening the first weekend in May, this is a mega blockbuster.
Yeah. Yeah,
A-
and that wasn't the case here. I mean, this thing made less than Blade Runner 2049. 32.7 was the opening for Blade Runner 2049. Obviously, that was a
a big IP.
different sort of movie, a big
Yeah.
IP, thinky, sci-fi. There was supposedly some anticipation for a sequel to that movie. Dennis, you can say the last name because I'm bad at it. Villeneuve. Yeah,
Denis Villeneuve. Yeah.
Villeneuve. Yeah, my apologies. Denis Villeneuve directed it, so he wasn't the name he is now after the Dune films, but still he was an auteur in the sense that if you knew, you knew. So the fact that that movie made more than this, which was like a popcorn film with two beautiful people supposedly hanging out, which you said in your synopsis of that movie, they don't really hang out all that much. Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
So that is sad to me that this is supposed to be popcorn entertainment and people didn't want to sit and buy popcorn and watch it. There was just wasn't enough people who thought this was a must see.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, it's a problem based on the expectations, because in the end, this movie, 28.5, did, I guess, on with the high end of what you could expect for a non-IP, just star-driven movie that's not a sensation.
Mhm.
Something like Oppenheimer is a sensation, but for a
Yeah.
movie that's just a movie, that's just movie stars, and it's pretty good, and there's no IP, and it's not the gentle minions, there's not a TikTok phenomenon attached, just a movie. 20 high 20s to 30 is the high end of what an opening weekend is going to be. The problem with The Fall Guy is, A, the Gosling expectations were just too high. Coming off of his Oscars, coming off of the Beavis and Butthead SNL sketch, coming off of Barbenheimer, the expectations for anything he was going to do next were through the roof. And
Yeah.
so that was a problem for this. The opening weekend, the first weekend in May kicking off the summer, that's a problem. And we on the show try not to talk budget that much, but in the
This
end,
you have
this
to. You have
movie
to here.
cost too much. The reported budget on this is, I think, 120, 130, and marketing is what it is. We know marketing you can't talk about. You got to market a movie, but this movie having a price tag that high for, and I saw this film, no special effects set pieces that are that memorable, and you just didn't need it in this movie. When you look at some of those other movies we talked about, like Lost City, you do one or two action scenes, and then you rely on the stars being stars. That's all the Fall Guy needed to do. There's a version of the Fall Guy that cuts out like 40% of the special effects action set pieces and makes exactly the same opening weekend as this movie did, because that's not whoever went. We saw the post tracks. People went for Ryan Gosling 50%, Emily Blunt 35%. That's why people went. There is a version of this movie that is a much lower budget, and exactly the same amount of people buy tickets to it.
Absolutely, and that's the thing is that is one of the massive problems with these sort of movies is that the amount of money you see being spent is not seen on the screen. It's
Right.
not,
It's not.
right? I mean,
It's not.
you
It's just
you see
not.
some you see something like Dune and its grandeur.
Right.
You see things you've never seen before.
Right.
This movie, it's things you've seen before done better or the same or worse. There's also the element, and I stick by this, is that these sort of movies, these sort of comedy action movies that aren't funny have been coming out fast and furious in the past 5 to 10 years, I think, right? And they have diminishing returns. I do think that there's too many of these, and you can find them on Netflix. Like, what's the difference between this movie and Day Shift other than the fact that you have Gosling and Blunt,
But
right?
that's a big difference.
But it is a big difference, but the quality of the filmmaking isn't different. You know, it's like that's the problem is that we see too much of this same stuff. And at the budget that it's at, it's not worth it. You need to make a movie that looks like this for $80 million, which is
Right.
still a lot, but it's not what this movie ended up being.
Yeah, I don't think it's the genre. I know you've got
I
a r
disagree.
a real hard on for this genre being the problem.
Uh-huh.
I think it's just this is the high end of what this genre is gonna do when it's not IP and when it's not a sensation. And that is how these have to be budgeted with that in mind. You can't have a movie like this with the expectation that it's got to open to 75 million to be successful.
Mhm.
And especially when there's no real added benefit for packing in more of these kind of scenes into a movie like this because it's never going to bring even more people in. You know, the way
Yeah.
that you get people in at that level is the once or twice a year TikTok sensation, or it's, we talked about this over the weekend at BOHQ as these numbers were coming in. John Wick 4 is going to open to 70 million, but John Wick 1 didn't open to that.
Yes.
And I think with the Fall Guy, we're never going to see this as a franchise. They wanted this to be a franchise, but Fall Guy 3 could have opened to 60, 70 million, but they had to get there first. And John
Yes.
Wick 1 didn't cost as much as John Wick 4, and they were
Mhm.
able to get to John Wick 4. But you're never going to get to Fall Guy 4 because Fall Guy 1 just needed to make way too much money.
Yeah, and I said this when we were by the water cooler, that they were acting as if because of the similar movies done by this creative team or people in this creative team, that this was a sequel in the sense of it was earned because of all the ones before it. But the problem with that is that it's a new movie that's a new concept, even though it has those same creative people who've been doing the same thing for a while. It's just not the same thing as having a John Wick 1 to a John Wick 4. It's not because people don't care about the Fall Guy. They don't know the Fall Guy. They don't know the creative team behind these movies. They don't care, the general public. They just see Blunt Gosling in a romantic action comedy. They either want to see it or they don't want to see it.
Right.
And that's the thing. And we've talked about this before, and this is just very true. And it's been true for a very, very long time. Movie going isn't the we're just going to go see a movie. I'm going to
Right.
go to the Cineplex. I'm going to go to the mall and just see what's playing. It truly is what is making me make the decision to stop playing the video game I'm playing, to
Mhm.
stop watching the movie on Netflix well, not really the movie, but like the New Girl episodes that I'm binging on Netflix.
Mhm.
What is going to draw me away from these other things to be in the cultural conversation and see this movie? And there just wasn't that element here. Not that everything has to be a series of essays and a series of hot takes, but it does help when there's conversation. When you look at something like Snivel War, which
Mhm.
did what it did,
Right.
what can be said about that is A24 is masterful at making you want to see a movie. There was things to talk about with that movie. And
Mhm.
even when you look at Challengers was a movie that you saw, and when you left the theater, people were talking about it. Fall Guy, I'm sure people walked out and were like, "Are you hungry? I'm hungry." Right?
Mhm.
That was the conversation right after Fall Guy. Or, "Oh, it was cute," or "Gosling's so hot," or "Isn't Emily Blunt so talented?" Like, those conversations, but they weren't like, "Oh, well, in this part, and then blah, blah, blah," like, what do you think that meant? Not that popcorn movies have to be that, but there doesn't seem to be any conversation past watching this mindless movie and people enjoying it, but then it just dissipates into the air.
I mean, the fact that Civil War came out
Civil
a
War.
few weeks ago and made just 3 million less
I
than what
know.
Fall Guys opening to. I mean, when you look down the line, Civil War is at 62 million domestic. I mean, at this point,
Does
Fall
Fall
Guy
Guy make that?
Fall Guy will, but the fact that they will end up being so close domestically is mind-boggling. Like,
Mhm.
that is what's gonna happen. At this
Yeah.
point, Fall Guy making 28 and a half with the big movies coming out the next month, and I think, we talked about this. One of our first BO Boys episodes was we started this in fall 2019, and the Kristen Stewart Charlie's Angels movie came out that fall. Famous opening weekend disaster. And we talked, I mean, go back to the archives.
Oh,
This
yeah.
podcast is a historical document. We talked about the stink of a loser factor.
Mhm.
And I do think you look at and we're not trying to add to that conversation, but the conversation's already happening. To the degree that people are talking about Fall Guy, they're talking about how underwhelming the opening weekend was. And I do think this movie's going to start to have a little bit of the stink of a loser to
Mhm.
general audiences.
Yeah.
And that's going to make them hesitate to go see this, because the whole thing with Ryan Gosling is supposed to be his cool factor. He's the guy from Drive. He's got the jacket. He's
Mhm.
Ken, and that could have been goofy, but he made that cool. And this opening weekend kind of dampens that cool factor for him. And I think that's going to turn audiences off for the next few weeks. I hate to
Yeah.
say it, and I'm not. None of us are rooting for that, but
Yeah.
that seems to be the reality. That's what people are talking about when they talk about this movie.
Yeah, I mean, we really wanted Gosling to become that butts in the seat star that we think he can be, but this isn't the thing that is gonna do it, and there's only so many more shots that you get. Now, again, he's gonna get more
Well, he's a
shots.
giant star. I mean, that
Yeah,
that's the fact that now Ryan Gosling's shots are limited coming
and,
off of an Oscar nomination in the biggest movie of the year.
but Pat, I
Yeah.
mean, he's gonna have to stick to safer things to try and hit, as opposed to, if this thing is huge, that means he can do something really weird and funky and get some director with a big budget behind it. You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing I'm saying, is that I'm not saying that he's not gonna be the star of another big IP movie or something. I just think it would have been really great if this commercial movie could have done Baffa Bobo, and
Mhm.
then what's the guy who directed Lost River gonna do with some power to make a movie that maybe is left of center? That's
Mhm.
all I was thinking, because
Yeah, yeah.
you want to see people be able to do that. You wanna see actors be able to say, "Let's do something nuts." You don't want to get nuts, let's get nuts. And people going to see it. Like, that to me, it was the interesting thing about Gosling, because I do think he's got such an interesting, just diverse background in his talents. That's what I'm saying. Not that
Yeah.
this
It
guy's in jail or
No,
anything,
no,
by
but yeah,
no means.
obviously if this opens to 50 million, it puts him in another level that this movie's not gonna be the thing that does that for him.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's not gonna happen here. This movie at this point, I and it people seem to like it. I think the general consensus liked it more than I did. I liked it fine. Like, it's fun, but
Mhm.
there's nothing great about it to me. But I think the word of mouth will be fine, but not fine.
Yeah.
And it probably will get to under 100 million domestic. Like, this, it's just not going to be a sensation like everyone was rooting for with this.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of theories thrown around. We talked about some of them. Um, the the ceiling on a movie like this just is what it is. Um, and now it is weird. I will push back on, like, I'm seeing a lot of talk about just the idea of movie going at this point, where ticket prices are too high, people don't like going to the theater, all that kind of stuff.
Same old shit.
The same old, and then next week, if the Apes open to 70 million, then what happened? Did the ticket prices go down? Did the seats get more comfortable? Did the popcorn taste better? It's the same popcorn this week as it was last week, as it'll be in 2 weeks.
I mean, look at how strong the collab was. I mean, that's the
Right,
thing, is like,
right.
you're forgetting the collab so quickly. Don't forget the like, people love to forget the the things that go against their thesis,
Right,
right?
right,
And that's the thing is we were going nuts about how well the collab was opened and then continued to be strong. And now all of a sudden nobody goes to the movies.
right, right, right,
Tell
right,
tell all those young people who were going nuts over the metal glove that Kong had.
right. And well, here you mentioned the young people. It does feel like young people did not give a shit about this Fall Guy,
No.
and it did not break in to the TikTok sphere. It never really caught on. I mean, we saw the desperation of that Ryan Gosling dressing up with Mikey Day as Beavis and Butthead on the red carpet for one of the premieres last week of the Fall Guy. That
Mhm.
smelled of such desperation to get any kind of young buzz on this movie. And that's the thing. It's not even so much that this genre of movie is action comedy or the kind of action movie that you really don't like yourself right now. The problem with this Fall Guy movie is that there was nothing about it that ended up appealing to people who were like under 35 in a real way. This was a very 30 something, 40 something married people's movie, which is great. And that's me. And I went with my wife and we had a nice time. And $28.5 million worth of tickets were sold to people mainly in that demo. But there was nothing about this movie that was going to excite teenagers and 20 somethings.
So here's and I do not like when critics,
Huh.
review a movie that a movie should be or talk about what a movie should be instead of what the movie was, right? But as box office provocateurs as we are,
Right.
we want theaters to become a place where things are happening, right?
Right.
Young kids are bebopping around.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's hard not to think that if the Fall Guy starred, because I was talking about way back a few episodes ago that a great cameo at the end, a great stinger at the end is you got Logan Paul and he's playing the Gosling character in the movie. I'm going more full bore on that in the sense that what if this movie you have Logan Paul, he is the Fall Guy, he's the guy. And
Okay.
listen,
Okay.
he he is instead of trying to save his star, the star he is doubling for, somebody stole a limited edition Prime flavor,
Okay.
and
So he's playing himself. Okay.
he's he's playing himself, and
Okay.
he has to go get this flavor that was stolen by these bad guys, but he's like, "I'm not a real action star. I'm only playing an action star in the movie," right? So
Okay.
then the thing with the Prime is that it's available only to ticket holders of the Fall Guy starring Logan Paul.
Okay.
So that becomes an interactive happening a la the Dune bucket,
Right,
right?
right.
Where if you're a ticket holder for this movie, that's the only way you get this Prime flavor. That's it.
Right, right, right. So, okay. There's things I like about that, things I don't. I think that the Prime tie-in
Mhm.
makes a lot of sense.
Thank you.
Now, if you're Universal and you want this to be a big summer movie, as much as we both love and respect Logan Paul and all he's done and all his endeavors, I still think the safer bet is Ryan Gosling as the star, but I do agree more movies need to bring Prime in to the mix of the plots of their movies to
Mhm.
hook young people, and specifically having a new Prime flavor that is only available to ticket holders of a movie like The Fall Guy. That's a slam doink, and you can't do that with every movie because they could only Logan Paul could only come up with so many Prime flavors, and I know he's the one in the lab
Well,
coming up with these flavors.
yeah.
So this does have to be a thing that studios bid on Prime, they do 3-4 movies a year where they do. So for sure, the Fall Guy needed, whether it was the exclusive Prime flavor, they needed something
Mhm.
because it's in really really terrible zone of, it's not an original movie that brings you an original idea, but it's also not an IP that anyone gives a shit about.
Mhm.
So young people are not going to care about the Fall Guy TV show from the early 80s that was somehow before our time, and we're Gen Xers, and that was,
Well, I'm a Gen
before our
Xer,
time.
so it's not really before my
It
time,
it
but
was
I
before
mean,
our
yeah.
times. We were both babies when this was on the air. As much
Yeah.
as we respect Lee Majors, we were babies when he was in
Mhm.
his prime. And it's just, there's nothing about this movie other than young people liked Gosling and Barbie last year that is going to make them go nuts for this IP that they don't care about, not actually an original movie, not it's not Sydney Sweeney, and we're not saying don't cast Emily Blunt in this part, but
Mhm.
it wasn't those stars that appeal to them in that way. And there was no TikTok phenomenon for this. You know,
Eh yeah.
I wonder if Universal tried at any point. And you can't just create a TikTok phenomenon, but the whole stunt aspect does seem like there needed to be a TikTok phenomenon where teenagers are jumping off of high things
Mhm.
and performing movie like stunts, setting themselves on fire. If that had caught
Yeah.
on TikTok, that could have been the Gentle Minions boost that this movie needed.
Yeah.
If teenagers were setting themselves on fire and jumping out of windows, doing motorcycle crashes,
Mhm. Jumping
rolling
onto
off.
mattresses from the top of their roof.
Right, right, right. Yeah, that I think maybe even more than the Prime tie-in, that is the main thing the Fall Guy missed, was not creating some kind of TikTok teenagers doing dangerous stunts phenomenon.
And I think the thing here too is Hollywood is sort of now there's a whole stream of IPs that they
Mhm.
could have started to plunder if this movie opened big. So we're not gonna see a Simon and Simon movie. We're
Right,
not gonna see a Spencer for Hire movie. We're not
right,
gonna see a Hardcastle McCormick movie. We're not
right.
gonna see the Scarecrow and Mrs. King
Yeah.
movie, right? So
If
these are
you
things that
if
they
you're the
could have.
creator of Jake and the Fat Man, you're sadder now than you were at the Fat Man's funeral back in the day, because your
Yeah,
IP now is worthless.
yeah,
That
that's
TV show creator probably had a Jake and the Fat Man screenplay just waiting that
yes.
is never going to get made after this Fall Guy opening.
Well, there's so many uh, octogenarian TV creators that were hoping to get one last big payday, and their
Yeah.
children were
Yes.
waiting with bated breath to leech onto an IP and make money from their parents' hard work and creativity.
Yep.
And there's a whole generation of talentless Nepo babies who are upset at this Fall Guy number.
Yes, yes. If you are the heirs of Joel Iger, who is the creator of Jake and the Fat Man, this one hurt because you're
Yeah.
probably looking at your mortgage payments from the house that you bought on Jake and the Fat Man syndication money, and that's run out. Jake and the
Mhm.
Fat Man, at this point, it's probably on like Acorn TV. It's just on like those satellite TV channels, and they play it at 3 o'clock in the morning. But
Yeah.
so that family is not making much in terms of Jake and the Fat Man syndication money. And if this had opened to 50 million and they were able to sell the rights to a movie to Jake and the Fat Man to Universal, boom, they're set.
That's
They're
a fat
they're
paycheck.
That's a fat paycheck. They're paying off their mortgage. They're buying a yacht, all that. And now they're screwed. They're
Yeah.
screwed.
Yeah.
They're screwed. They're completely screwed. And I feel for
So
them. I do feel for them. And, I get it. They're rich. They're Nepo babies. They've been living off Jake and the Fat Man syndication money, for 30 years. But I do feel for them that they're not going to get the movie paycheck.
Yeah, and when I say like talentless nepo babies, I'm not making a judgment. I mean, there are people that don't have talent that are lucky
Right,
to have been born to people who created TV shows in the 80s and 70s and 90s. That's a lucky person. That is
right,
something that you get, you win the life lottery on, right?
right,
So
right,
I'm not going to sit here in judgment on those people. I'm just pointing out what they are.
right,
You know,
right. I
I would
mean, it's
trade
some
all of my talent, my many talents,
okay.
to be the son of the guy who created Fall Guy,
Yeah.
because even though this movie bombed and there's not going to be two, I mean, this movie, they paid a good penny to the people who created Fall Guy, and if I was getting a little trickle down on that, I'd let it trickle down on me full show.
Oh, of course. Yeah, no, right now I feel for the children and the grandchildren of Sidney Sheldon, the creator of Heart to Heart,
Mhm.
because after this weekend, they will not get a fat paycheck for a Heart to Heart movie getting commissioned.
Yeah.
That's just never going to happen for them. It's never going to happen for them. And I
So
weep for them. I weep for them right now.
I weep for them too. I mean, that's why I wear the glasses, is because I do weep so much. People think
Yeah.
that I, root for the failures of movies. It's just because I'm so emotional. I have red eyes
Yeah.
from this opening weekend, and I just don't want to show that vulnerability on air. So
Yeah.
now let's just talk a little bit, because we did mention, and obviously I said something about Gosling not having as many big swings because of this, and I think I clarified myself. But what does it do to him? Because this could have been big, really big. And this doesn't, of course, destroy him, but what does it mean for him?
I think all it means is it doesn't bring him up to a crazy new echelon that could have happened if this movie opened to, you know, $50 million. To
Mhm.
me, this is not a failure for him or anything that dings him. It's just something that doesn't put him, give him, like you said, let him do something completely bonkers.
Yeah.
You know, like this movie opens to 50 million, and honestly, he could have his dog direct a movie.
Mhm.
And I think that's the type of thing that, and Leo hasn't done that. He likes to work with Scorsese. He likes to work with known award-winning auteurs.
Not
But
canines.
Leo is a big enough star where tomorrow he could get, and not a $200 million movie, but like a 30,
Crazy.
$40 million movie directed by his dog or a
Mhm.
neighbor's dog. Leo could do that because of the incredible track record he has.
Mhm.
And Gosling coming off of Barbie, and then if Fall Guy had opened 50, 60, 70 million, if it had hit that, Gosling then could get his dog to direct a movie, and now he can't.
Yeah.
So I think that's sort of the result here is he doesn't just go to that level of stardom.
Yeah. Dog direct. Yeah, getting a dog in that director's chair.
Right, right. Like his next movie for sure will be not only directed by a human, but by a human who's got a track record.
Well, PTA, I think the next movie is the PTA movie, I believe, right?
Is Gosling in that?
Oh, I thought you meant Leo. I'm
No, no,
sorry.
no,
I'm
no,
I'm
no.
guessing like
Yeah,
God, no,
yeah. No,
I'm not
Leo's
sure
in
what
that.
yeah, he's in.
No, Leo could still get a dog. I know he's in the
You're right.
PTA movie, but Leo
Yeah.
could get a dog to direct his next movie.
But
Gosling can't.
Gosling, you're right.
Gosling can't. No, Gosling's next movie is going to be directed by a human with a track record. I don't think, listen, Gosling could do whatever he wants. Gosling's a star who gets stuff green lit at a certain level,
Uh-huh.
but he can't take his, favorite indie documentary director and say, I want to do a movie with them for 100 million. He can't do that.
Yeah,
But
he
obviously
won't be able
Gosling
to.
could do any indie movie he wants, anything 10, 20 million he wants, he could do that. He's still a giant star. People, and the thing about this movie is this is not Heaven's Gate. This is not a disaster
No.
where it just didn't open to that level that takes him to another level.
And
It's a missed opportunity cost more than it is a failure.
And it also did what these movies do around, so it's not like it opened to 20, because if it went that low under Lost City and Bullet Train, then we're talking what is gonna happen to Gosling. That's when we
Yeah,
know. If he can't bring 15,000,000, if it's $15,000,000, that's a trap. That's terrible. That's horrible for him. But the fact that he got an equivalent opening to something like Bullet Train and Lost City, that is not a complete total disaster.
no, I mean, that's the thing. This movie opened to what Sandra Bullock's movie did, Lost City, what Brad Pitt's movie, Bullet Train did. Like he opened to the same as those level of stars with a
Yeah.
movie that is the same type of movie. The difference is Lost City opened in March of that year and Bullet Train opened in August. So
Yeah.
the expectations and the budgets were different. If this
Mhm.
movie Lost Fall Guy opened the first week in April and did the exact same number, it's a totally different context
Yeah.
than all the pressure it got being the summer kickoff, replacing what had traditionally been Marvel movies that, whether they're good or bad, they open to $100 million. So it's all about the context and the budget on this. But if this movie cost $80 million and opened in April and did the same numbers, it would be a different conversation.
And it's not opening in a downtime where it's gonna eat for weeks and weeks and weeks. It is gonna get blasted by competition, and that's also gonna reflect on this movie poorly.
Yeah.
Because again, if it opened Bullet Train territory, then it's got free reign. But right now, you're gonna go up against Apes and Furiosa, two big question marks, but still, those are movies that could absolutely eat this movie's lunch. And I mean, we know Apes is opening in a lot of the IMAXs. Fall Guy's going to lose a lot of these IMAXs. So I do think that there is, you know, uh, it's going to be rough going for this movie to make it to what Bullet Train and Lost City did.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And I think the IMAX thing is part of the problem here in some ways for something like Fall Guy. We're watching this movie and thinking about how much they spent and all of these over the top action scenes they put in there that didn't even seem to have anyone's heart in it. It's almost like a movie like this feels the need to go to a certain level with the action scenes and the set pieces to qualify it for IMAX.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the movie didn't need that. The audience doesn't really expect that out of these movies or go to it in an extra way because of it. And it's going to lose all those IMAXs to Apes anyway next week.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you mentioned competition in the coming weeks. Let's talk about the competition it had this past weekend because I'm gonna read it at the beginning of an email. We got taken to task, Clayton, by one of our wannabe oh boys because we completely punted on what ended up being the number 2 movie at the box office this weekend, which was Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. I'll just read some of this email
From
from
who?
from wannabe oh boy Daryl.
Daryl.
So,
Must
wannabe
be
oh
Daryl.
boy Daryl writes, "The Phantom Menace re-release. You guys done goofed." That's a subject. He says, "You guys done goofed," before he even gets to the email. So that's Daryl. But then he starts off, "Hey guys, love the pod. But just wanted to let you know that you guys really whiffed it on the Phantom Menace's re-release this weekend. This may not be quite as big a miss as your predictions when you severely underestimated Civil War, but this has to be a bit embarrassing for you when you didn't even have the number 2 movie in America included when you made your top 5 predictions in your latest episode. Um, so this is what he says. If you're mystified why the Phantom Menace did so well this weekend, above your expectations, let me break this down for you. The in the 25, I'll just read the sentence. In the 25 years since its release, future generations discovered the film. Once the internet became mainstream in American households, the meme internet community has created countless memes that have gone viral devoted to the Phantom Menace. The rest of the prequel trilogy. Witness one of Reddit's most popular subreddits, /r/prequel memes, which has over 3 million subscribers. So, Clayton, Daryl takes us to task that we did not predict that Phantom Menace would do that well this weekend. And his big take is this movie has just become beloved in the last 25 years in a way that we're not accounting for.
Yeah, so a few things. Thank you, Daryl, for your email. And we did touch on it briefly at the end of our episode because we did get an email about it. And we were sort of up in the air because we didn't know the number of theaters it was going to be in,
Right.
right? It ended up being in what, 2,700, something like that.
So pretty wide release. Yeah.
Yeah, so now it was May the 4th this
Be with
weekend,
you.
so that's a
Yeah.
big that's a big Star Wars holiday, so they had
Mhm.
that going for them, which is great, and I think this is so positive for theatrical
Mhm.
in a weekend when everybody's saying, "Bread and circuses alone, we can't eat off that anymore," right?
Right.
We need, this is people don't wanna go to the movies. People wanna go to the movies, they wanna see events, they wanna see things that are worthy of movie going, and whatever you say about George Lucas and whatever you feel about these prequels, they were and are spectacles that belong on the biggest screen possible. There is a generation that this is their Star Wars, as there will be a young generation where the new chapters that came out are gonna be theirs, right? So there's always a generation that has their Star Wars trilogy now. And it's like these people who didn't get to see it in the theater are going to the theater because that's where this
Mm.
movie belongs. We need more people like Lucas making movies like this where people want to see them. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I think that's positive that this thing went to number 2 because it's showing you that there is a place for movie going in society. They just need to have the movies.
Right. Right. An interesting thing from Daryl's email is that he thinks that when if Disney does a re-release of Revenge of the Sith, the third film of the prequel trilogy, I expect that to do even better, probably anywhere from 10 to 15 million at least. Many Star Wars fans now consider that film to be as good as the original trilogy. Hey, bring it on. I would love to see Revenge of the Sith come out one weekend, maybe in August this summer when things are going to be, or I guess they'll save it for the 25th anniversary of when that was released, but put it out there this August and let that movie make $15 million. Why not? Why not?
Now, Pat, you remember this, and I remember this because this happened when we were in high school. That there
Mhm.
was a big re-release pre the prequels
Right.
for the original 3 movies.
Oh, those did Bobo. Those were, I think, opening at like $20 million when they
And
were releasing New Hope and Empire and the Wookiee movie.
obviously we were not, there wasn't as much competition for us, and movie going was a different thing back then where you would just go to like I was saying earlier, you go to the mall and say, "Let's just see something." But
Right.
those were destinations. That was a weekend when you're saying, "We're gonna see A New Hope. We're gonna see Return of the Jedi. We're gonna see The Empire Strikes Back." And those made Bafa Bobo. So why would it be any different with these movies, right?
Yeah.
Because people older than us would scoff at Star Wars and say it was lame the same way people were scoffing at these prequels and saying they were lame, and a younger generation said, "No, those are our movies and we love them." And they're showing it with their dollar bills.
I mean, is this a huge weekend for Jar Jar Binks and his
Biggest weekend for this is
reclamation?
yes, the reclamation is happening,
Mhm.
and, it's one of those things where time time is such a healer.
Right, right. I mean, who would have thought coming off of his his performance at the Oscars and his SNL hosting and that this weekend, I would say Jar Jar Binks is hotter than Ryan Gosling. He
Yeah,
didn't make as much money opening weekend, but I think culturally Jar Jar is up and Ryan is down. And listen, we said Ryan's still a giant star. He could, but Jar Jar, I don't know if he could get a dog to direct his next movie, but I
probably
do
not.
think Jar Jar coming off of this number for Phantom Menace could get in a movie in a way that we wouldn't have said that a month ago.
It's a Simon Rex situation here with Jar Jar.
Okay.
Laughing stock for a while, and I love listen, nobody loves Simon Rex more than I do and you do,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. You're a fan of his music. You've always
I'm a
been.
fan of his music, absolutely. Him and
Yeah.
Andy Milonakis.
Yeah.
So, Red Rocket was I think there's a chance here that you could get your Jar Jar Binks Red Rocket situation going, and there
Okay.
be some Oscar buzz. It's possible, it's possible.
Right.
But, I mean, look at the charts. Jar Jar beat Zendaya.
Right. Second weekend for challengers. But yeah, Jar
But
Jar did beat
still,
Zendaya. You're right.
Jar Jar beat Zendaya, and he can say that, and he can eat
Yeah.
on that for a
Yeah.
while.
Hey, we
Now
predicted Challenger second, and Jar Jar shoved it in our faces. Jar
yeah,
Jar shoved it in our faces this weekend, and good
and
for
I
him.
would do an imitation of Jar Jar. I know the SAG strike is over, but I'm not gonna draw that heat. You can imagine what Jar Jar would say, because I just don't think I should be doing a Jar Jar Binks impersonation because,
Well, not
again
for free. Not for free.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
but I do think that is a feather in Mr. Binks's cap.
Oh, this is huge. This is huge. I definitely think he is so castable now
Mhm.
after this movie finishing number 2.
Yeah.
I think he becomes someone who, if you're an indie movie director and you're looking to do that, yeah, that Simon Rex, John Travolta and Pulp Fiction reclamation project, this movie has made him bankable again. And now if Jar Jar Binks winds up in the right project, I think he becomes a full-on star again.
Let's hope it's more Travolta than Mickey Rourke. That's always the hope.
Right. Well,
That's
that
the hope.
the thing is, yeah, you hope that Jar Jar Binks isn't hated by the Hollywood community the way Mickey Rourke was.
Yeah. With reason. I mean, with reason. I mean, we're not gonna act like Mickey Rourke is some innocent here.
Oh,
He
no,
yeah,
no,
yeah,
no. Listen, no, he deserves the hate that he got. He wasn't able to capitalize on the wrestler, and you hope Jar Jar Binks doesn't fall into the same pitfalls that Mickey Rourke created for himself. But no, this is a huge weekend. Is it at all a it's hard to say because they just made a Star Wars movie in a long time. Does this do anything to kickstart that brand again?
oh, it's
To
such a mess. I think it's such a mess. I think a reason why people are going to see this movie is because things were, hilariously simpler back then when these movies came out. These movies that ended up being movies that happened before the 3 movies we all knew,
right.
and, which was confusing at the time, if you can
And
believe
and
it.
a,
People
and
were
another
thinking
movie that becomes a half movie in between
yeah,
these
yeah,
3
so
movies and the movie we all knew.
but this harkens back to a simpler time where you had 3 movies, a a Christmas special that was not looked at as canon, and that was your Star Wars, and then all of a sudden you get new Star Wars, people are going crazy. And there's that feeling here that's just like a simpler thing to follow, which is this is a prequel to those 3 movies. And they stand by themselves for a younger generation too, you know?
Mhm. Mhm. So yeah, Star Wars Phantom Menace shocked us all. As Daryl said, we done goofed and we
Mhm.
done underestimated Jar Jar. And I personally will not do that again. So the next time Jar Jar Binks has a project opening in theaters, I am going to crunch the numbers and really give it a good hard look and not just hand wave whatever Jar Jar Binks does next.
And,
Um,
I think these sort of re-releases, like, if you wanna do I mean, Jurassic Park, I know it was during COVID times, but Jurassic Park was the biggest movie of the summer of 2020. And you could do that with some of these catalog films to fill these gaps and make some money. Now, you don't wanna do it too much where it becomes, now we're doing reruns, but there is
yeah.
a level of being able to strategically release these catalog films to remind people and show them that the theaters are a place they wanna be, you know?
Yeah. I mean, this is such a special case because Star Wars is so popular, 25th anniversary. There's a holiday for it. I don't know
But
if
that's what
there
I'm
was a
saying, there are
dinosaur
other
day.
But there are other created, come on, there's so many created holidays. I mean, I'm just using that as an example as a blockbuster done right, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, of course. Yeah.
Y
I mean,
and not every year, I mean, you do it every 10 years, but still, there's enough movies that you can cycle through in order to make that a profitable strategy.
so I just want to read a couple of more things that we've gotten from listeners. This is from one of our listeners put this on Twitter. So Champser, and we've discussed Champser on this platform before.
Hey, Champster.
Uh Champser says, another take. First weekend of May is only the start of summer season for Hollywood, the business. But for audiences, it's only a big weekend because there's a Marvel movie. It's not their summer start. I think the audience summer start is Memorial weekend only. So very interesting. And I looked back, you know, olden times, summer of 89, which is maybe the greatest summer movie season of all time.
Mhm.
And you look back at those days, and it really was the summer movie season did kick off on Memorial weekend, not the first weekend in May. Summer
Yeah,
89, Indiana Jones is coming out on Memorial weekend.
Last
And
Crusade.
yeah, Last Crusade comes out that weekend, but you look at the first weekend of May of that year and there's no big movies coming out. I'm
Yeah,
looking at uh May 5th, 1989. The only movie opening that weekend was a movie called Criminal Law, and you've got K9 in its second weekend. So the summer movie season, it's true for just people
people.
is closer to when school gets out, unless there is, you know, these Marvel movies or even like a Pixar movie. But
Yeah,
otherwise, people are
or a
not
fast
real.
movie.
Yeah, or a fast movie. So Fall Guy just wasn't at that level. And so people aren't going to start going at that level until they actually are feeling like it's summer.
Yeah.
So I think Champster's onto something there. It's like we look at it as like the business considers first weekend in May is summer, but
Mhm.
just everyday people, they're like, nope, it's May 23rd, like the
Yeah.
summer solstice calendar says. Well, that's actually the end of June, but when they're
Yeah, no,
barbecuing.
I mean, I think that's a very valid point, and yeah, and I think the business was able to start the summer early and get that summer movie season buzz going earlier because of, like you were saying, those Marvel movies really extended it, and maybe we have a more truncated summer movie season going forward until something takes the place of superhero movies, or we create a more diverse, theatrical atmosphere where more big movies can live together, and
Right.
like there's enough room for Fall Guy to open the same weekend in May as Apes or whatever. Not maybe not that, but where you can have something else that's like an adult. A Challengers opens with Fall Guy, and they both do Bafa Bobo, and add up to something like a Ant-Man pre Quantumania opening. Like
Right.
that's the atmosphere of theatrical, you know, theater going that I want to live in.
Right. Right.
A
I
bounty, like a just like a what is that? Like a garden of ample delights.
okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that it's without the superhero movies at the level they were, it's just not going to be a situation where you could wait for movies to open to $100 million anymore.
Hmm.
And it's going to have to be more movies opening around 25 to 30 something $1 million. That's going to have to be what you live on. So you just need more movies, is the other thing.
Yeah, and we're in a sort of downtime because of all the strikes.
Right. Um, we just got a boots on the ground report for Fall Guy from wannabe oh boy Anthony. It says,
Anthony.
hey bo boys, wannabe oh boy Anthony here, longtime listener, second time emailer, Coastal Elite. Thank you. Glad you're a Coastal Elite. With some boots on the ground reporting, just got back from a Sunday screening of The Fall Guy, Alamo Draft House in downtown LA. Well, I'm not a critic, huh? I, like
Huh?
Pat, was unfortunately underwhelmed as it seemed were the majority of the audience, given the less than spectacular reception it received. One thing I found interesting was that during the pre-show entertainment, which always has a connections to the movie, interviews, videos, etc. The opening credits montage to the TV show The Fall Guy started playing, and the man seated next to me was confused. I overheard him ask his friend, "Is this the movie? Is it already starting?" If I had to guess, I'd say he was in his early mid 30s, but found it interesting that he seemed to have absolutely no idea this was based on a TV show. And if this man was confused about the issue, could a reason for the opening weekend underperformance be that many people don't realize the term the fall guy is a play on words? Perhaps they think it is about a guy who loves the fall season. Maybe it would have been played, maybe it would have played better if it had been called the summer guy. As always, love the pod. Looking forward to your LA show. That's interesting. I really did the title of this movie. It had no cultural weight. No one knows the title came from the show. But then if they don't know that the Fall Guy is based on IP, is this just a terrible title?
It's one of those titles that is almost too clever that it becomes stupid. And that I think is a problem with this because, we take some titles for granted, like something like Die Hard, other than the fact that it was a battery, is a term that we now know because of a huge movie franchise.
Right.
But if Die Hard would have been a show that people watched from 1981 to 86, and then you never really heard about it again in the last like 20 years, that would make someone be like, I don't even know what this is and what this means. Fall Guy, yeah, why wouldn't you think that this is a guy who enjoys the fall season, loves to
Right.
jump into piles of leaves here? Maybe this is like the little Gosling. He could be landing in leaves. We don't know.
Right. Right.
And they're releasing it the beginning of summer. That doesn't make any sense, right? I
Right.
mean, there is some cognitive dissonance involved in this title that I, as a Gen Xer, take for granted, and you, as a millennial,
Also Gen
probably
X.
are confused by, but will not admit to it because it would make you seem less masculine. That is an issue you have to deal with outside of this show. But you are going along with the
I
fact that this
I know
this title makes sense to you.
I know that today is Kurt Loder's birthday. May 5th is Kurt Loder's birthday. And I know that because he was so important to me as a Gen Xer. So
Okay.
I am Gen X.
Happy
And
birthday, Kurt.
happy birthday, Kurt. We know he's listening. He's always listening to us. Um, yeah, there's something to that. The Fall Guy is a bad title if you don't know what the show is and it means nothing to you. It's not a title that I think is offensive or turns off a young audience, but it definitely doesn't do anything.
Mhm.
And it does make it seem like whether it's the fall season or just like is he a clumsy guy? You
Yeah.
know, am
Is
I
he
going
like
to
Mr.
see a Miss
Magoo?
Right, right. Is Ryan Gosling in a Mr. Bean type adventure here? And which would be great. I think if you're looking for the new Mr. Bean, I think Gosling could probably nail it. But that doesn't scream giant summer movie. Ryan
No.
Gosling as Mr. Bean. Maybe Ryan Gosling as Johnny English, sure,
Mhm.
but not as Mr. Bean, not as a guy who's falling all the time because he's clumsy.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's the danger of they obviously didn't care about this IP. They didn't use the song in the movie at all.
Yeah.
That they didn't do anything really to reference anything from the show. So what is even the point of using this as opposed to Ryan Gosling's in a movie called Stuntman?
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
why even use the IP of the Fall Guy?
Hollywood sometimes does the thing that The Strangers do, to families where
Mm,
it's there. Why are you
yeah,
making Fall Guy? It's there.
right.
Why are you killing us? You were home. You know,
You were
it's
home.
the
Yeah,
same thing. You were home.
yeah,
Like, it's there. It's
right.
why they do anything because it's there. It's just sitting there and they feel like, "Well, we gotta squeeze all of these rocks and see if they bleed." And sometimes they do bleed, and then they just, pick up another rock, and that's how Hollywood works. So, it's just that it was there. It's sitting
Right,
there, and they took
right.
it,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, they didn't get anything out of it. It's a title that is either indifferent or bad. And there's the audience listen, the audience for that show is dead. They're dead or they're in hospice at this point, like the
Yeah.
hardcore audience. Um, so yeah, it it it's a disappointment because we wanted this to be a movie that's so big that Ryan Gosling could get his dog to direct a movie, and that didn't happen.
Mhm.
But it's also did what these movies are gonna do, and so that's it. So in the end, I think we started this episode feeling pretty sad,
Mhm.
pretty, heartbroken, and I think we've just come around to the expectation for this just should never have been what we allowed it to get to as a
Yeah,
society.
and the sky isn't falling, you
No.
know, the guy is. But
Mhm.
let's, because I mean, I know we're way long on
Way
time, but
long.
we didn't even mention Challengers down only 49, the women going to see this movie in droves. Now, we had a conversation, you don't think this really dug into Challengers too much, but there's a lot of young ladies who went and saw this movie second weekend, and I think that did, that they were trying to get young ladies to go to this Gosling movie, and they were just more interested in Challengers. I think that's just a fact.
Well, I mean, it's hard to say that Challengers did anything to affect the Fall Guy because the Fall Guy, we're saying it's a disappointment that it made 28 and a half instead of 40. And Challengers made 7.6 million total. So, what in actual numbers, what did Challengers take away from the Fall Guy this weekend? It's just
I
people
think
didn't
it
go to the
took
Fall Guy, not that
I
they
think
went to Challengers. I think, if anything, Star Wars Phantom Menace doing 8 million, which was something that was a little more unexpected,
yeah.
is it takes a little bit more out of what you could have imagined going to the Fall Guy more than Challengers, which it just
Here's
didn't
my
make that much
math.
money.
Here's my math. The combination of Challengers and Phantom Menace took about 5 million from Fall Guy, where then I would be right on the nose and nail that 33 number. So that is the number that was taken, and so that makes me right if
Okay.
those movies don't take that money. So, let's talk real quick, newbie, horror, tarot, no one cared. We knew what this was. It was what we thought it was. It's not, listen, horror's not failing at the box office. There just needs to be a Megan 2 or something akin to a Megan that is going to blow people's socks off. That's what we're waiting for here, is like a great horror movie, and we just haven't been
Right.
getting great horror movies. That's just the
Yes.
facts.
Yeah, and it's not even about that horror needs IP sequels. They I think more than any other genre, fans of horror want new horror, but there just
Uh-huh.
hasn't been anything great that's come out
Yeah.
this year. There's been some okay movies. Immaculate was good, Late Night with the Devil, and those did well,
Mhm.
but there just hasn't been a horror sensation. And something like Tarot, the fact that a movie like Tarot with no stars and no premise at all
Other than
still
its
did
cards.
other than its cards still did over 6 million just because it was a horror genre. If anything, Tarot shows the strength of horror movies because there's nothing to this movie other than its genre, and it still did over $6 million.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, if anything, this movie is a win for horror because it's almost shows the bottom for horror is so much higher than the bottom for any other type of movie.
Oh, yeah, like a bad comedy. I mean,
Right.
those will just be in the basement, and horror
Right.
will still bring the young people, you
Right.
know? And then just a quick shout, because we didn't talk about this, for theater opening for A24 as I saw the TV Glow. Very buzzy movie that a lot of people that we know and respect have liked.
Yep.
54, what did it end up with? 116K
Yep.
in 4 theaters, 29K per theater, 88% critics. So this thing isn't gonna blow up and be huge, but you know, it's A24 doing what A24 used to do, small idiosyncratic movies, getting some buzz going here.
Yeah, I mean, I listened to a review by our chief horror correspondent, Brett of the New Flesh. He also has another movie review podcast, Roger and Me,
Mhm.
and he gave such an impassioned, glowing review of I Saw the TV Glow that I now am definitely seeing this movie in theaters very soon.
Mhm.
He he was just showed you we're not critics, huh?
Huh.
But in his review of this movie, he showed you what critics are supposed to be and the
Love
power
it.
of critics. And so I would seek out that review on his show Roger and Me, and then seek out the movie. We did get an email a few weeks ago from a wannabe oh boy Connor, who did point this out back in April 22nd. He says, I live in a very liberal city, large LGBTQ plus community. Everyone I talk to is excited for this movie about I
Mhm.
Saw the TV Glow. Trailer's great. Soundtrack created by Phoebe Bridgers. There's no big star, but it is produced by Emma Stone. Could this thing be a breakout? I don't find a tracker financial info. Think if it opens at 3 million, gets past 10 million, it should be celebrated. Obviously, it's only open in the most limited run.
Yeah.
And so we will follow this as it starts going wider over the next few weeks. Phoebe Bridgers doing the music, and you said she's in this movie, Clayton.
Well, from what I've heard, there's a performance scene where she is present. And, one of the actors in it is the mind and the musician behind Snail Mail, a great band that I love. So there's a lot of cool, music in this. That's one of the reasons I want to see it, but
Okay.
also just seems very interesting.
Okay.
Also, as a Gen Xer, it is in the 90s, so therefore I'd be interested in it. Now,
Oh,
when a
yeah. Now I
movie
can't wait to
from,
see it.
the
Yeah.
2008 comes out, you will be as excited as a millennial, you
I
know.
mean, how old do you think you are, Clayton, compared to me? Like, just I get when you look at the two of us, it makes sense for you to think that there's a 20-year age gap. But
That's
we
ridiculous.
did, of course, graduate college the same year.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
I want you, yeah, I'm a year older than you, and that is all that matters when it comes to generations, my
but
friend.
also graduated all the same grades the same year. So how does that math work?
Well, look at the laws in Pennsylvania. I've said it multiple
The
times, and you never
laws.
do. The laws in Pennsylvania, the school laws, the age of starting kindergarten in Pennsylvania and the age of starting kindergarten in New York City. In New York City, kids are in rehab from heroin at 5 years old. In Pennsylvania, we don't do those sort of things. We
So
are
you take your time. You really you in Pennsylvania, it's a slow pace for all these kids.
yes, yes, yes.
Okay,
We
got it.
take our time because
You
you
take
know
your time.
what? We got to work in the fields. We got to work in the fields. They need us. They need us, youngins, to be milking cows and stuff. They let you just run rampant on the subway trains when live in New York. They're
Right. I
like,
mean,
yeah, I guess
we're learning to read is what you're trying to
three,
say.
like
We're learning
three.
to read earlier. Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
learning. Yeah, you're
We're
learning
learning
to
to
read
read. Yeah.
at the racetrack so you can figure out which horsey to bet on.
It's still we know how to read. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter what we're reading. We're learning how to read earlier. So, all that to say, I saw the TV glow. We will be following that in the weeks to come. I'll read the results to you, Clayton, if you're still not at that level to
Well, the guy who
read
does
the box office
the
reports.
plow every week, I think people know I can read.
Okay.
And there's books
Well,
behind me. What's behind you? I've
a
never
picture
seen a book behind you.
a picture of a whale. There's a
Look at all
picture of a
those
whale there.
books. What do you think? Those are just for funsies?
Yeah. I mean, people could hand you things. It doesn't mean that you know how to read them.
Believe me, you've moved enough me out of enough apartments to know that I have a lot of books.
You definitely have them. So,
And guess what,
Clayton,
Buster Brown? You're gonna do it again, and it's gonna be so much worse this time.
no, we have interns for that now. This is going to be the one time you're going to have to interface with wannabe junior intern Jack, is he's moving you out of the current shed that you're in into
Yeah,
your
yeah.
next shed. So
Listen, something we can
email
agree
us.
on.
Email us, theboboyspodcast@gmail.com. We love getting your emails, your boots on the ground reporting, your predictions, all of that great stuff. Email us, theboboyspodcast@gmail.com. Wannabe senior intern Christopher just finished finals week. He did let us know that it was finals week this past week. So congratulations, Christopher. I'm sure you aced it. The most important
Congratulations.
thing is even during finals week, he did deliver us all of the vertical clips for TikTok, Twitter at the BO Boys Pod. So he's studying, he's acing tests, he's running the social media. Great job, Wannabe senior intern Christopher, Wannabe junior intern Jack. Of course, brought back the Substack. So I mean, so many people subscribing, commenting on these articles. Jack is just creating his own community there on the BO Boys Substack. So go be a part of that. Of course, if you haven't already, watch our latest Kirk exclusive on the Kirk Minahan YouTube channel. We did a deep dive into the whole controversy about The Rock peeing in Voss water bottles and being late to set. And we really dug into that and took Dwayne The Rock Johnson to task on the Kirk Minahan YouTube channel.
Yep.
Our own YouTube channel, of course, is just growing every single day. So if you just listen to the podcast, you're not getting the whole story. You've got to watch the videos and subscribe to the BO Boys YouTube channel. Give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. We will be reading Apple reviews very soon. We're going to get to it. So leave us 5-star reviews. Love the show, blah, blah, blah. And we will be reading those very soon. That's it. I mean, that's all I got, Clayton. Is there anything left to say?
There can't be. There's nothing.
No.
Except for until next time. We'll
Will smell
smell
you
at
at
the
the
bar.